This is Dr. Maria, and you are listening to the Energy of Money podcast. You know, it's been such a privilege for me to have this podcast and be able to reach out to you and talk to you about certain things that might be helpful for you, especially when it has to do with our relationship with the energy of money. Today, however, I'm going to diverge just a little bit outside of the usual talk on money, and I'm going to be talking about miracles. Now, of course, I've heard people say it would be such a miracle if I had more money, or be absolutely miraculous if I were to win the lottery. As a little sidebar, let me tell you that I have actually coached at this time 4 people who have won the lottery. Not billions of dollars, but millions of dollars. And let me tell you that it was stressful because all of a sudden they didn't know what to do with the energy. They started spending it on all sorts of things that maybe they wanted, maybe they didn't want. Some family members would get jealous. You gave your cousin this much money, but you didn't give me any money. And it really became a difficult situation. I know, for example, that some people, after experiencing the miracle of the lottery, have ended up 5 or 6 years later in worse shape than they were before they actually won the money. But that's not what I'm going to be talking about altogether today. It was just a little sidebar. We're going to be talking about miracles and what they're all about. I want to start out with a quote by Willa Cather from Death Comes for the Archbishop, and she wrote, "Miracles rest not so much upon healing power coming suddenly near us from afar, but upon our perceptions being made finer, so that for the moment our eyes can see and our ears can hear what has been there around us always." What has been there around us always. And so you see, that throws a different light on what miracles are all about. Maybe it's true that miracles rest not so much upon something coming outside, like something happening outside of us, but that there's a change in our perception, so that maybe something that was commonplace before becomes, in and of itself, somewhat of a miracle. I want to give you some examples. Last Saturday, just a few days ago, I happened to visit my Aunt Gloria. Now, my Aunt Gloria is 94 years old. She is sharp as a tack. And every time I go to see her, she lives in Santa Monica. Every time I fly down from Sacramento into Santa Monica to see her, she always is so happy to see me. And she almost always says, "Marichki, it's so wonderful to see you." And then a few sentences later, she'll say something like, "You were such a cute baby." Now listen to this. In a few months, I'm going to be 80 years old. And can you imagine being 80 years old and having someone still alive on this planet that remembers you when you were a baby? I call that a miracle. On the way to my Aunt Gloria's, I landed in Burbank Airport, and I happened to catch a drive with someone who works for a company. I don't want to mention companies because I was picked up by someone who drives for a well-known company. And on the way to my Aunt Gloria's, he was willing to stop at a nearby Starbucks without charging me anything extra so that I could get one of my favorite drinks. And he was so kind and generous that I got him a drink as well. And one of the miracles for me in that moment was to see the delighted expression on his face as he was tasting the coffee he loved. When I got to my Aunt Gloria's, just as I was getting out of that car, a couple of people who lived in the same little apartment complex that she lives in, a man and his son, they were just going out onto the sidewalk with these two pairs of, they look like sunglasses. I said, "What's happening?" And they said, "Well, there's a partial eclipse of the sun. Would you like to see it?" And I put on those glasses and I saw this partial eclipse of the sun. It was about 60 to 65% occluded. And it was just another miracle. I'm saying all these things to you because sometimes little things happen for us that, we say, "Oh, that's great," and we go on with our day. But the question is, do you and I consider that these are miracles? So I want to give you a definition of what a miracle is from my point of view. And many of you know that I'm a coach and I love to coach people in a very pragmatic way to discover how to live their lives. And so this is the definition of miracles that I've developed. A miracle is anything that occurs outside of your usual way of seeing things. Okay. I call that usual way of seeing things, I call it your structure of knowing. And a structure of knowing is the way we commonly view things. For example, you and I have a structure of knowing about what it is to drive a car, don't we? We have a structure of knowing about what it takes to ride a bicycle. But let me point something out to you. Do you remember the first time that you got onto a bike and discovered balance? I remember that. I mean, I must have been 10 or 11 years old, and my dad was, uh, I was on a bike, and my dad said he'd keep holding on to it so I could balance. He wouldn't let me go, wouldn't let me go. And, you know, at one point he did let me go, and I fell over, but I got back on. And after a couple times, and he promised me this time I won't let you go, I started pedaling. And all of a sudden, I heard his voice, but it wasn't right next to me anymore. It was a few hundred feet in back of me. And I had discovered how to keep myself up on a bike. I discovered balance. And at that moment, I was in the presence of the miraculous. Do you remember that time for yourself? I remember another time when I was 16 and my mom had given me driver's lessons and she always drove with me so I could practice, and I went to school, driver's school, and it's just wonderful. And then once when I was around 17 and a half, she said, "Maria, would you like to take my car all by yourself and pick up your sister at her piano lessons?" Now, my mother drove a forest green Mustang convertible with tan leather interior. I remember it to this day. And I remember backing out of our driveway. I even remember the Beach Boys were playing California Girl, dee, 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 dee. And, and I put the hood back, the cover back so I could see and the wind was just starting to whistle through my ears. And I had this feeling of the miraculous. And as I drove down the street, I tried to drive as slowly as possible, only because I wanted it to last longer. I was in the presence of the miraculous. I was driving my mom's convertible without her. Well, about 6 months later, fast forward, my mom comes to me in the afternoon and she dangles the car keys in front of me again. And she says, "Maria, would you like to go and pick up your sister at her piano lessons. I have to stay here at the house for a little while. I was watching Star Trek, just the beginnings of Star Trek at that time. And I remember saying to her, "Oh, Mom, do I have to do that? I'm watching Star Trek right now." Why? Because that which had been miraculous no longer was quite as much of a miracle now. Because you see, whatever is a miracle is something that occurs outside of your current structure of knowing. And then after a while, your current structures of knowing, they begin to expand to include that miracle, and it's no longer a miracle. Even as you're hearing me right now, can you think of some things that have been miracles in your own life? You know, maybe it wasn't the first time you rode a bike or the first time you drove a car, or maybe it really was. But what else was a miracle for you? Maybe the first time you stood upright on a pair of skis finally after falling down, which actually had happened to me up on Mammoth Mountain. But what has it been for you? Now, I'm going to ask you another question. Can you think of something that has occurred for you in your own life regarding money that was a miracle? Anything. For example, when I was in grade school, I was, I think, in 10th grade. Bank of America came around and gave each one of us students a little bank card where we could go and open up a savings account. And we also had a little booklet that went along with it because we could put the date, how much we had saved, and how much was in our savings account. And I remember, once again, my mom taking me to the Bank of America. At that time, it was on the corner of Crescent Heights and Santa Monica Boulevard in Los Angeles. And there I was. I put $10 in my first savings account. I felt rich. What was it for you? Can you locate some early money miracles? Take a while. Think about it. And even if you have to shut the podcast down for just a moment, you might take a piece of paper and a pen and write down some of the earliest money miracles that you experienced. Maybe your first paycheck. I remember what it was for me. I got paid for washing dishes at my mom's bakery, you know, because she paid me, I don't know how much, but at the end of a week, I'd get a lump sum. I'd put some of it in my bank savings account, and I'd spend the rest of it on candy and comic books and stuff like that. What were some of your early money miracles? Now, fast forward. Are you willing to see some miracles in your life today? Earlier in this podcast, you heard me talk about my Aunt Gloria, who I love so dearly. You heard me talk about the miracle of going to Starbucks and seeing that driver having the best time with his favorite coffee. And you also heard me talk about the miracle of seeing the total eclipse of the sun. I didn't even know that there was an eclipse of the sun until you showed me. So, a miracle is anything that you can notice that is outside of the ordinary. Extraordinary. Extraordinary does mean outside of the ordinary, extraordinary. What if just for the next, oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, just as a little mini kind of an exercise for yourself. What would it be like for you if you were to look for little miracles in your life? Because you see, you might have heard me say this before in past podcasts, but our brain has a natural tendency to look first in life for things that aren't working. It's called the negativity bias. And without going into a long, long lecture about it, it's just part of the brain that was built in about 100,000 years ago when we lived in caves. And the only way that we could keep alive, because we weren't very strong as animals, the major way we could keep alive is to look for all the dangers first in any situation before we went out for food or anything else. So the negativity bias has us tending to look at or look for, without our even knowing it, things that aren't working for us. But I'm asking you to embark upon a journey to train your brain. Because you see, you are not your brain. No, you have two eyes, a nose, a mouth, and a brain. You are that which has the capacity to train your brain, to have it look for things that are really working, to, to take it away from that natural response of, oh, this didn't work today and that didn't work today. So I'm not asking you to look for things for which you are grateful. No, that's a different thing. That's useful as well, but I'm asking you to look for small miracles. Did something happen to me today that was extraordinary? Something that I didn't expect, that was a wonderful little result. It could have been big. I could have been called by, a cousin who owed me, a few $100s, who said, I finally got the money. I'd like to pay you back. It would be a pretty nice miracle, yes? But even the smallest ones, it doesn't have to be about money, but it could be. Is there, for example, I remember I had been saving, and I still do save coins in this big gourd, and for years I would put pennies and dimes and nickels and an occasional quarter, and about 3 years ago, I decided to empty it out on the floor on top of a newspaper to see how much money I had. And oh my heavens, it was amazing. I took it to the market and put it through one of those coin machines that counts all the coins. I had a couple $100 right there. Didn't even know I had it. Really, I just, for years, putting nickel, dimes, quarters, whatever. That was a money miracle. So, in closing, look for some small miracles. It does not have to be about money, once again. But of course, since this is the Energy of Money podcast, you know that I'm going to be asking you to look for small money miracles, but even other miracles, like a sweet note from a friend or a chance encounter with someone that you had been thinking about for a long time, or whatever it is. Because, as Albert Einstein once said, you can have two viewpoints in life. The first one is that nothing is a miracle. And the second is that everything is a miracle. And of course, we know the ones that Albert Einstein took as he went on to develop his wonderful theories of relativity. So you and I may not be an Einstein, but we certainly have a brain that we can train to look for some things that are going right, some things that made us happy today, some things that occurred that were outside of the ordinary. Because as you start training your brain for that, your brain will obey you and start looking for those things. I wish I could be with you as you discover the miracles in your life, big and small. So this is Dr. Maria saying, have a miraculous week, okay? Talk to you next week. Bye-bye for now.